Hello, David. Can you hear me? Hi, Diane. Dolufu. Hello, little kitten. Jake. Oh, so many good people. Always. Great. Thank you, Bonnie. Oh, I'm doing great, little. Very good. Hi, Nancy. Joyful living. Hello. Hey, Cynthia. It does say Blaine. Nice to see you. Hi, Carol. Bonnie. And Daniel. Nice to see you. Great. Daniel is on. So I'm going to say a few words of introduction. So occasionally on my lives, I like to introduce you to, hi Jake, I introduce you to people I find here. So by inclination, hello, mindful being, Aniko. So by inclination, I'm a community builder. I like to meet people and I like to introduce people. Rosanna, hello, nice to see you. I like to introduce the people that I know to other people that I know. And lately here on Instagram, I've been finding some great people. So Barrett Self joined me a couple of months ago, and The Crystal joined me recently, an artist. Hola. And today I am joined by Daniel Allen of MetaSoul. And I found Daniel on Instagram. I started following him. I started to read his posts. I felt a lot of resonance and a lot of inspiration in what he had to say. And so I asked if he would be willing to join me so that we could talk a little bit about, the art of self-creation and the inevitable challenges and miracles that go along with taking deeper responsibility for the creation of your own life and your own being. And I talked with Daniel a little bit a few days ago, maybe a week ago, and I know he's on right now. So I want to introduce you to Daniel Allen of MetaSoul. And Daniel, I think you can request to be a guest, and then I can let you join me. I think that's how it works. And thank you, everyone who's popping in now. It's nice to see you all. And there's Daniel. Don't know if I did that. Hang on. There you are. Hey, how are you?
I'm good, my man. What's going on?
Nice to see you, my friend.
You too.
What do you got behind you? I see you've got your MetaSoul
I got a bunch of stuff.
logo.
Got a lot of stuff happening over here. So yeah, I got the logo there. I have the poster that it says imagination near the bottom. It's an Einstein quote. I think he says imagination is the most powerful force in the universe.
Yeah.
And then the newest edition is the Infinity Gauntlet there that my son and I built last night.
Oh, very cool.
Black Panther poster, just because that's my man's.
Because of course.
Exactly.
That's fantastic. Well, it's great to see you, and thank you for joining me today.
It's my pleasure, man. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have
There's
you.
two Daniels, by the way.
Oh, two Daniels. Hello, Daniel. Other Daniel. How are you?
Yeah. Gonna be joined by the team here in a second.
That's nice. That's very sweet.
Okay, let's get out.
Yeah. All right, yeah.
Let's get out.
Shimon.
Daddy, can I finish the goblet?
Hi, Cliff. How are you? And I think that was Christopher who flew by. When there's two of us on, I just get like a quick glimpse at whoever comes in. Yeah, that's so cute, Little. I agree. 2 Daniels. I thought there was only one, but we got a double feature.
Oh, for sure.
Which is lucky for us.
All right.
Hi to both Daniels.
Hey, what's going on, everyone?
Yes. So Daniel, why don't we, because I've been loving your posts on Instagram, and so I hope everyone will follow you. Oh, thanks, Little. And but why don't we start with something that you and I mentioned briefly when we spoke, which is why you chose the term MetaSoul and how it is that you see us as developing beings.
Yeah. So I landed on a name because it was important to me as I was building out my coaching practice, kind of building this the brand around personal development and wellness and personal growth. Just pulling different things out of the air, so to say. And so of course I made a list of a bunch of different things, and I wanted to have something to do with the soul, because that's really where my focus is. It's like, yeah, we can get you rich, we can get you love, we can get you all the stuff, but if your soul is not built along with it, then all of that was going to be worthless. You're not really going to enjoy it much, and all the negative things that we see with purely doing things for the material aspect. So I wanted the soul to be involved. So I was, thinking things like, ultra soul, oversoul, different things like that. And then when they landed on MetaSoul, and of course, I Googled the definition of it. And, when something's meta, it's when it's aware of itself. I actually have to credit you for kind of reintroducing me to comic books.
Okay.
Because as I went through one of your last books about the higher self, and you talked about your experience with the Captain Marvel back in the day, I was like, oh, let me go find. I actually did find that issue of Captain Marvel, and it's up here in my office now. But so there's this thing called the fourth wall, and Deadpool is actually infamous for this, where he will speak to the audience.
Okay.
Through the comic books. And so Deadpool, as a comic book character, knows that he's in a comic book character. That he knows that he's a comic book character. Come on, words. So that's a very meta thing.
Mm.
And so, in thinking about us as beings, I describe us as infinite expressions, or individual expressions of an infinite consciousness on a cosmic journey experiencing itself.
Right. So say it again. It's individual expressions of an infinite consciousness on a journey to experience itself.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
And so with that kind of as the foundation of who it is that we are, as we grow spiritually, as we grow into our higher self, it's this oversoul, this ultimate version of us that we're aware of and is aware of us at the same time.
Mm. Mm.
So it's kind of like, we're aware of ourselves from multiple perspectives in time, because we know time it's not a thing.
Yes.
Everything that's happening is happening in the now.
Right.
And so we don't have to wait for 10 years to pass to become a 10-year later version of ourselves, but we can embody that now.
Mm.
And so the whole thing with MetaSoul is like, we are embodying our higher selves in this moment, being aware of who it is that we are.
Right. Fascinating. So you do coaching work with people,
mm-hmm.
and I teach meditation, etc. And what's amazing to me is sometimes I'll have these moments, as I'm sure you do, where the full weight of the fact that we are individual expressions of an infinite consciousness on a journey to experience itself will kind of dawn on you, right? And every time it dawns on you, it feels like the first time.
Right.
It's the ever-present, fresh, new revelation of, oh my God,
mm-hmm.
And I mean, I guess it's probably lucky for us that we tend to forget who we really are because it's so overwhelming when it occurs.
Right.
Maybe there's some advantage to that. But I wanted to ask you, in your coaching work, how difficult do you find it to, well, there's some aspects of who we are that are so big, so mysterious, so significant and important, and yet they're very hard to bring into like work on the ground, you know. And I wonder how you see that in your work. Do you feel like you are meeting people who really are open to, you know, and wanting to experience the fullness of their being, or are you often finding that people are wanting to make changes on the ground, or how do you experience this?
Yeah, most of the people I run into and who are kind of in my orbit, they're open to this idea of the higher self and, you know, our infinite being. And so for a lot of the concepts things that we might discuss, it's easier to convey.
Mm.
However, I like to really kind of approach it like at a sidewalk level, you know, not so much ivory tower. So whereas we could talk about, you know, the infinite expansion of our souls and our soul's calling. Sometimes it's most easier just to simply say or to talk about things from the aspect of following your highest excitement.
Yeah.
What lights you up in this moment?
Right. Which, you know, if you think about it, that, yeah, and this is a very interesting point, you know, because there's a certain excitement that we feel as human beings that is directly connected with the passion of our higher self.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever is our soul self, whatever is that part of us that's connected to an infinite, that there are forms of excitement, right, that are directly connected to that. That is like your soul's excitement. Mm-hmm. It's not yours. It's not. Right. It's not just yours. It's your soul is going yes, you know. And of course the navigation through life, if one can just keep following the guidance of that excitement. Mm-hmm. The trick, of course, is discerning that excitement from all the other sources of excitement that we get excited as human beings about a lot of things, and not all of them are good for us. So yeah, how do you work with people in terms of that kind of discernment?
Can I tell a story?
Sure, please. So
this is kind of how I initially began to experience this. For 32, 33 years of my life, I grew up, was raised in church. And so a lot of the individuals I looked up to were pastors, preachers, bishops, you know, people like in these high levels of leadership in, you know, all these different organizations. And of course, as I grew with the advent of the internet, and now we have access to, you know, sermons and things like that 24/7. It's like, you know, I get to be exposed to these people I look up to, you know, time and time again. And for a long time in my life, I said that I don't care what I'm doing for work as long as I'm helping people. And the idea I had in my mind was that my idea would be to be a pastor or doing some sort of work in ministry. Then in 2020, my perspective and the way I see the world kind of got blown to smithereens. I began to ask the questions that I thought I had dealt with, but I hadn't really dealt with it. I mean, the way I explained it to my wife was that I was trying to read the ingredients of the bottle from inside the bottle. Like I had to escape the bottle to like see it objectively. And so as I'm going through all of like this entire process, I really sat with myself one day and said, okay, is being a pastor what I really want to do? And I remember sitting there to myself, I was sitting on my bed in my room and I was like, no, I don't. And in that moment, I was kind of faced with all the whatabouts. What are they going to think? Who's going to say what? And, you know, where's your life going to end up now? You know, if you're not doing this, you know, highest thing that you can do. But I recognized it wasn't necessarily what I wanted to do. Not saying that it's bad or that nobody should do it, but I recognized it wasn't what I within myself truly wanted to take on. I wanted to take it on because it's what I had grown up with. It's all I had known. and I didn't know it was okay to choose something else.
Right.
And so once I became aware of that, I was like, okay, I can make another choice. I was like, yeah, I would feel better if I did. So to answer your question, one of the ways we navigate through this situation of determining our soul's highest excitement versus those other excitements we may feel, oftentimes those other excitements will show up with shoulds, they'll show up with whatabouts, they'll show up with concerns about others' opinions and things like that. There might be fear attached to it. And not a fear of, not like that tension that we feel before we try something new.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, okay, I'm about to ride this roller coaster for the first time. You feel that some of that tension and trepidation. But no, this is more of a fear of, like, I don't want to fail. I don't want it to go wrong. I don't want it to go bad.
Right.
And so as long as if it's those fears, like, what is somebody going to think? It's probably somebody else's excitement or something that's preventing you from doing it. Because when your soul says no, like, you don't have to justify it. There's no question about it. The more reasons you need for it, the less you really want to do it.
Right.
And I think that's what it all goes down to.
That's beautiful and beautifully said. That there's so many influences on us in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's opinion influences us. Our culture, the things that culture tells us we should do. Even our own personal experiences created all kinds of desires and fears,
Right.
And it's loud, all of those things are very loud. So this, it's interesting, the soul's desire, the soul's passion, although when you lock into it, it is like the loudest and most obvious thing in there,
Mm-hmm.
But until you lock into it, it's actually quite faint sometimes. It's
Right.
like there's a lot of other loud things in front of it. And you have to be willing to listen, and to sit. So, I teach meditation in part because I think it's valuable for all of us
Right.
to just learn how to be and not react to everything, so that we can hear more deeply and see more deeply what's being called of us. Because this is all about, in the end, what I'm hearing from you is this is really all about authenticity.
Right.
It's a deep authenticity where at the level of your real soul, like what's really, really you to do is being manifest. So yeah, that's very, very powerful. Now, I think we titled this something about passing through the darkness of self-creation, right? So we're kind of talking around that right now, but I wanted to ask you to say a little bit more about how you see the darkness, the inevitable darkness that we all end up having to travel through.
Yeah, what's coming to my mind right now are the relationships or the similarities to Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. We're raised in a context. We're given all these tools to go out into the world and live a life that somebody else has prepared us for. Somebody has given us tools and resources to walk a particular path that may not be our path. And so the journey of the hero is to kind of look at all that they've been given and say, well, no, this might work for me, or this, I really don't feel good about that. Let me tread my own path. And so we enter this space of unknowing where we're called upon to be more authentic. We're called upon to be more of our true selves, but we don't know how because we've never been that. We're faced with, for the first time, the judgments and the criticisms of those around us who have promised us love and loyalty. But the moment we kind of switch up, and just on a cognitive level, the moment we stop thinking the same, all of a sudden we're made enemies. So those are kind of obstacles and things that we'll face externally. Internally, we have mainly our own self-judgments that we handle and deal with. And that's where I believe most of the darkness extends from. And here's why. I saw a quote recently that said that, you know, the amount of light that you can kind of exude or show into the world isn't based upon all the good you do. It's based upon all the darkness that you can handle,
Mm-hmm.
more or less. I'm not quoting it directly.
Sure.
And so when we face the darkness within ourselves, whereas Joseph Campbell would, you know, related, you know, slaying the dragon. When we face that darkness within ourselves, when we face our judgments, when we face our own internal criticisms, and we love them and we allow them as they are, and we don't go to war with ourselves. My mind goes back to some Krishnamurti has talked about in recognizing feelings and emotions. He's like, you know, when there's anger, when you recognize the energy of anger inside of you and you identify, you become angry. But he's like, if you would just allow it to be and just kind of see it and just feel it, you'll recognize that it's just energy without the label, without the name. And you don't have to take on the identity of being angry. And once you recognize that it's just energy, it's going to pass.
Mm-hmm.
And so going through this darkness, it's definitely multi-layered, you know, internal things, external circumstances, the whole unknown of how things will play out in the real world. So just kind of put some meat on it. We all grow up here and go to college, get a good job, or at least that was the advice as I was coming up. Mom always said, you're either going to go into the military or you're going to go to college. Those are your only options. Right?
Mm-hmm.
But now I was like, wow, there's so much more out here that I could have done. So go to college, get a good job. And so we end up in these jobs that we feel like we have to do because we want to be good contributing citizens and we want to provide for ourselves and we want to survive. But when our soul starts to call to us and we get uneasy internally, we're not as comfortable as we once were in our jobs. We're not as comfortable as we once were with our particular social circle.
Yes.
And so we start to get pulled in another direction and toward different things. And it may be things that we were drawn to as children, but we said, "Oh, I'm an adult now. I can't do those things. I can't get back into comic books. I can't play video games. Those are childish. I can't just draw and paint and color all wild because, you know, there's an order to things. I have to be inside the lines."
Mm-hmm.
And so the unknowing of stepping into that space, of stepping into those questions that arise. Well, what happened if I actually follow this calling? I'm not so comfortable with my job. Should I leave? If I leave, then what? What will I do next? How will I survive? And so stepping into the unknown is stepping into all of that and so much more.
Beautiful. That's very beautiful. You know, I've been watching your posts for, I don't know, a year or so, and now talked to you a couple of times. And you're an interesting. You continually surprise me in beautiful ways. You know, I can tell you draw from a lot of things. You know,
right?
I think you just mentioned Krishnamurti.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because I don't know that much about you, so I keep saying, "Ooh, he's like been over here, and he's been over there." So that's beautiful. But I want to tell you about someone that I don't think who you might not know, but just popped into my mind.
Mm-hmm.
His name is Vernon Kitabu Turner.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll text you a message about it so you don't have to remember. He wrote a book called Soul Sword quite a few years ago. But now he lives in the South. I've talked to him a few times. He's probably a bit older than me. I want to call you a young man, but you know, you're not that young, but you're younger than me.
Right.
So,
I am a young man. I'm super youthful.
there you go. You're a young man.
You see the toys I play with?
Well, look, if we go by toys I play with, I'm young too. So I've been kind of working and operating in the spiritual world for, you know, basically 30 years. And when people work with me, it's really only to do spiritual work. Like that's what I do. I can't really help them with much else. You know, that's what I do. So that's the world I'm in. Now what I notice is, and I wanted to ask you about this, it's a very white world. This kind of alternative spiritual world.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked Vernon about this because he's a beautiful guy. You're going to love his book. He was an Aikido master,
Mm-hmm.
and he spoke so beautifully about mind like water, you know,
Right.
and he could get supposedly, and you know, supposedly he would demonstrate this. I never saw it, but he could take out like 6 guys with one finger, you know,
Right.
in his mind like water state. And he had beautiful teachings, and he was quite a powerful guy. And I asked him, Vernon, why do you think so few people of color are engaged in this work?
Mm-hmm.
And his answer, which struck me as beautiful, there it is, Soul Sword, thank you. He said, you know, the thing is people of color in this country and in many countries, but certainly in this country, he's here. He said there's other forms of freedom they haven't gotten yet. And so like it's like a hierarchy of needs. The higher freedom of the soul
Mm-hmm.
kind of requires that you have certain other freedoms in place in order to pursue it, which made sense to me. But I wanted to ask you, because you know I talked to him probably 20 years ago, right? So the world's changed a lot in 20 years. How do you find this? You know, in terms of the mix of people that come to see you, how that works, how do you engage with that? I'm curious because I would like to see this alternative spiritual world be more inclusive and invite more people in.
Right.
And I'm just curious what your experience has been.
Mm. Yeah, what you said is actually very, very accurate to certain thoughts I've had myself. As I think about something like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where at the bottom level you have issues of survival, and at the top you have, you know, self-actualization. For a lot of Blacks and African Americans, people of color here in America, or anybody in general, Black people specifically in this context,
Right.
socially and economically, there are things that, you know, we're faced with that other ethnic groups aren't.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you'll find, you know, rich and poor people of all kinds in every strata of you know, economic differences that you can create. But whenever somebody's focused on surviving, there really isn't much attention or awareness given to what we would call like these higher consciousness things. If I have to get up, go to work 2 or 3 jobs, care for my children, and worried about when I'm gonna get rest, just so I can get up and do the same thing again the next day, it's tough to sit back and contemplate the stars or our place in the universe.
Right.
It's not impossible. People have done it.
Absolutely. Yes.
But for me, what I believe, and I actually just had this conversation with another brother a couple of weeks ago, and I kind of said this very thing, and he said to me, "Is like I believe that people believe that you know we don't have the time to sit back and think and to be." What it is recognizing where people have been conditioned to believe that, okay, I can't do X, Y, and Z if I have to focus on this, or I can't put my time and energy here because I have these other things going on over there. So if we would stop for just a moment, if anybody could just stop and breathe and recognize what it is that's happening in that moment, that yes, you may be consciously aware of the air entering your body, but recognize you aren't the one breathing yourself.
Mm.
I believe just that thought alone, maybe not consciously, maybe not for a while, you may not see the effects of it, but if we could recognize that even in the midst of all the chaos and all the turmoil that people may face on an everyday scale of life, just recognizing that we are being breathed, and that we are being lived, will turn our attention inside towards something greater than us.
Yes.
And it'll begin to shift our focus from, oh my gosh, I have to survive, to, okay, I'm all right. You know, life is here. And of course, you know, walking with somebody through this who's like actually in the muck right right now, it won't be this simple necessarily, but
Right, of course.
it would be a great place to start.
Yes.
To say, life takes care of itself.
Right. And I was just thinking it's very beautiful. And what I was thinking is the hierarchy of needs, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Obviously, there's enormous wisdom in that. Of course, if you're struggling to eat every day, it's so difficult to think about higher things.
Right.
At the same time, it's also true that those lower, the lower level needs, they're kind of unending, right? And there's also probably some truth that self-actualization will help you meet the lower level need, like
For
the
sure.
kind of surrender that you're talking. So yeah, it's kind of a chicken or egg thing. Because what I'm just hearing you say now is if people step past the idea that they don't have the time or they can't do it or that it's not worth it, right? Which is ultimately and they realize that no, if I find peace, if I find the presence of something higher in my life, that's going to create space and energy and power that's going to not just allow me to cope with the challenges, but ultimately allow me to make bigger changes to my circumstance, which I think is what you're offering in terms of medicine.
For sure. I've talked about it with my wife often sometimes that, there's one verse in the Bible that I don't believe I've really seen lived out, and that I don't believe even most Bible-believing Christians truly believe. Of course, they might cognitively assent to it, like, oh yeah, Jesus said it, I believe it.
Right.
There's this verse in Matthew chapter 6 where Jesus said, take no thought for your life. Don't worry about what you'll eat. Don't worry about what you'll drink. Don't worry about what you'll put on, for these are all things that the Gentiles seek after. He's like, look at the birds of the field. They don't toil, they don't sow, they don't reap, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. He's like, look at the flowers of the field. And Solomon in all of his glory wasn't arrayed like one of these. But if your Father will take care of the birds, and he'll take care of the grass, which is here today and tomorrow thrown into the oven, wouldn't he much more take care of you? And so, we're told to seek first the kingdom and all these things will be added. Not as a condition, but as a result. So the reason I say that I don't believe that most people really believe that is because we're all really concerned about those things.
Yes.
Even on a minor scale, we wake up in the morning, okay, what do I want to eat for breakfast? Instead of just kind of getting up and just going to the kitchen and whatever's presenting itself, taking that in or, things like that. But I wonder what would happen if we really did truly let go in like that most ultimate sense of surrender, because it's like, well, what did Jesus mean when he said, take no thought for your life? What does that mean to take no thought? I don't know. Somebody help.
Exactly. That's beautiful. That's one of my favorite biblical passages.
Yeah.
It's such a beautiful sentiment, and it's true, because the other part of this, I guess, is we live in a materialistic culture that is, it's materialist, meaning that it believes in the reality of matter over spirit, and it's consumerist, meaning that it believes that happiness can be found by consuming, right? And so you have a culture like that, and all the systems, the economic systems, the cultural systems, all depend on people buying all the time, right? So you need to convince people that happiness is going to be found at that level of kind of material accumulation in order to keep the wheels of the economy moving. I often say, what would actually happen if a significant portion of the population, let's say half, suddenly realized that they didn't need anything to be happy, that they were already happy?
Yeah.
And they didn't, it would be an economic collapse. It would be a disaster for the economy. It would be fantastic for people.
Right. Because that's one of the main things that holds people back from following their soul calling, especially in regards to a career. Is that I have to work to make money. How else would I live? How would I pay the rent? How would I buy food? Again, we're not vilifying money. It's good for what it's good for. But it's when we attach that extra meaning to it. I've been reading this book, and in it, one part the author said to just sit with the feeling or sit with the sense of the thing that's just happy to be alive inside of you. right?
Beautiful.
In the book, he's looking to get people to, take their focus off of money being their security and recognizing that security is within ourselves. And so as I'm reading the book this one day, I'm trying to feel it. I'm like, I'm feeling my heartbeat, feeling my breath, but I really wasn't feeling that sense of security. It wasn't until the next morning where my cars, ended up spinning out on a snowy highway. Had a little accident. Several hours later, got home, got my truck, got to work. I'm sitting at work and I'm recognizing that in that moment, like right after the accident, as upset as I wanted to be, I wasn't. It was like I was sitting in the calm. It's like, if you could imagine, like sitting in a kiddie pool, like motionless, but I'm sitting there splashing, kicking the waves. Like, no, I should be upset. I want to cry. This is terrible. But then, like none of those thoughts crossed my mind. Like, oh my gosh, what are we gonna do? How are we gonna do? How are we gonna get through this? Like, and I recognized, like, oh, this is that peace.
Yes.
This is that peace that I am. And I was sitting at work later on. I thought about it, I'm like, wow, everything that I really need to survive. Love, air, sunlight. It's all right here, right now.
Beautiful. Beautiful. You see, a moment like that is when you really see the fruits of your spiritual practice or your spiritual life. Because what experience you happen to have when you're meditating or doing your spiritual practice or contemplating the Bible or whatever you're doing is great, of course. But it's in that moment when you're challenged and you see where you habitually go to, like when you start to recognize, oh, I fell into peace in the midst of challenge, even though my memory of myself is telling me I should be upset. That's actually not where I went. Of course, Bruce Lee, the martial artist, and he's got this amazing quote that says, and I'm slightly paraphrasing, but more or less it's, in times of challenge, we don't rise to the level of our aspirations. We fall to the level of our training. And so when you train yourself to rest in peace, then when you're challenged, that's where you'll fall. This is like the huge gift that like your spiritual life gives you, is you develop a habit of resting in peace. And then you find when you're up against the wall, that's where you end up. And it's beautiful to hear your story of that.
When the rubber meets the road and the car meets the guardrail.
That's right. Which, these things happen in life. So I said earlier that you do, your post surprised me, you surprised me, because the coaching world is a big world and has there's all kinds of coaches coming from all kinds of places, And what I can see from you is you have a very, the thing I recognize from the start is there's a lot of depth to your being. And that's what I resonate with in your posts. But also I see you must be either a reader or a studier or just a very curious person. You've got a lot of Christian background, of course, in your background. You seem to have read a lot of things or been exposed to a lot of things, and you must be very open-minded because you are able to incorporate multiple perspectives. So just, in these few minutes, I was wondering if you could just say a little bit about your path. Like, what's been your journey to here?
Well, so I guess I start out just by kind of recapping what I said earlier. About being raised in the church and really only being given one way to look at the world. Very clear rules. This is right. This is wrong. This is good. This is bad. We do these things. We don't do these things. Then my first real kind of transition and switch happened in 2015, where it was during a church service, and I had this experience where I felt as though the literal presence of God had began to speak through me. And I began just kind of speaking it out and went in for probably about 30 minutes or so, right? After that service, the pastor, came to me and was like, yo, don't ever do that again. And I was like, excuse me? He's like, yeah, God wasn't in that. That was all the flesh. Don't do it again. And I'm like, but similar things have happened before and there was no problem, So I had asked him, I was like, so how am I to know what's really real? Or like what's God and what's not God? And he said, stick with me and I'll teach you and da 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 da. And I'm like, I just found that completely untenable. I slammed my Bible down. I was like, no, like how's that gonna be? Da da da. So that set me off on, this path of looking for, what was real, how could I know God and how could I know God was speaking to me? And so that led me from a Pentecostal background that I grew up in into what's called Reformed theology. And Reformed theology is generally more conservative in their approach to Scripture. And they, of course, as all Christians say, they hold the Bible to be the highest authority. But of course, their hermeneutics and way of interpreting Scripture is different from Pentecostal interpretation. And so that caused a whole nother mess of issues because I'm like, well, the Bible says X, Y, and Z, and we do A, B, and C. What's up with that? I started asking all these questions, trying to poke holes, thinking I was smart and wise. And long story short around that, we ended up leaving the church I grew up in, found another church not too far away from where we lived. And, we kind of planted ourselves there. And in the 5 years we were there, I had ascended, if you will, to the position of elder, which is basically a pastor within the church. So I went from like speaking, teaching, preaching in one church, doing the same thing in another arena. In position of leadership, I'm teaching Sunday school, doing all these things. And then in 2020, after the coronavirus kind of shut everything down, everybody's online. And I began to interact with more people from around the world and, of course, people with different backgrounds and different life experiences. In certain contexts, I would get this sense of this love and care and compassion that wasn't necessarily foreign to me, but I would say, like, wait a minute, well, if they're embodying this kind of love, is that just common grace? Is that only because, God's love really permeates all beings, and although they may not know Christ, they're still able to, express, his love? And that was kind of the first question. Then I started asking more and different questions. And of course, like I said, things I believe I had dealt with once upon a time. For a young cat getting into Reformed theology, apologetics is huge. And so it's like studying arguments for the faith, against the faith. Like I was involved in so many arguments, right? Like I loved it. But then in 2020, when I had this, when I began to shift again into this broader spiritual perspective, and I began to recognize that the world. So I said to myself one day, so you mean to tell me, and I'm thinking this to myself, I was like, so you mean to tell me that one group of people in one place in the world, literally this big, got the revelation from God for all people, for all time? And of course, when I said that, I hear my Christian apologists inside me rise up. I'm like, yeah, God can, choose who he wants. He delivers his message. It's inerrant and infallible, all the arguments. And it's like, yeah, but what if that's not the case? If I take away that given, if I just say, okay, yeah, no, it's not. That's not it. What are we left with? And so over, 8 to 10 months, I'm just beginning to pull the cards out of the house. And eventually it collapsed. And in October of 2020, our fourth child, my wife and our fourth son, was born. And we were in the hospital the night after. And I told her, I'm like, babe, I can't hold on to the faith like I once did. And I, began to tell her about this journey. And eventually I would tell the other elders and everything. And it was really all because I felt like I saw something that I couldn't unsee. I felt like I felt something that was real beyond a cognitive understanding. And I felt like to turn my back on it would be doing myself a disservice. Mm-hmm. In Reformed theology, they talk about this concept called irresistible grace, meaning that, when God draws you to himself, you're coming. Mm-hmm. And it's not so much against your will, but he does this work internally and draws you in. And so you want to come, but it's God doing all the work. And so that's kind of how I like in this situation. It's like I was drawn to this perspective. And it's like, even if, like I remember telling my pastor, it's like, I want Christianity to be true. Like I wanted to continue to believe and I wanted everything to stay the same. But because of what I had seen, because of what I had started to read, because of what I understood internally, because of what resonated with me as truth, as being real, I couldn't then look away and just say, "Oh, that's just devilish manipulation and trickery," because the devil's crafty and he's been around a long time and he knows how to fool even the best of us.
Mm.
And so, after I kind of stepped down from eldership and started to walk the path just a little bit more, read a little bit more, listen to a few more people, I'm like, it's not so much that one group has more of the truth than another. Even, we hear about the elephant illustration and people touching different parts of the elephant. I think it might even, like, the spiritual reality may even be beyond that, because it's like the moment you really begin to understand something, as you're growing, you recognize you really don't understand it that much at all. One of my friends early in the process for me, she said, because I was like, I'm trying to understand all these things. And she said, let go of that, because the less you try to understand, the more you will understand.
Mm.
And I've learned that spirituality is infused and basically built upon paradox, and what's real for you in one moment may not be real for you in the next. But the essence of it is, can you be who it is that you are in each and every situation? I forget who said it, but it's like, truth is a pathless land. Like, there is no path to truth.
That was Krishnamurti too.
Yeah, right. Like, there is no path of truth.
Right.
It's like if you're walking the path, then somebody else probably laid it down for you, and that's not your path. We enter the dark forest where there is no path. We go the way where no one else has gone before, because no one else is us. No one else is this individual expression of consciousness. There's something, that source, infinite consciousness, infinite being. There's something that it wants to experience through our beingness and our location and our culture and our experience in this world. And so if we're taking on the expectations and thoughts and beliefs and the justifications for living from other people, then we're not fully embodying the fullness of life that wants to express itself through us in this lifetime.
Beautiful. That is so beautiful. So, Daniel, this is definitely going to have to be part one, because we have a lot more to talk about.
For sure.
But I wanted to say, first of all, anybody who's on here who has not followed Daniel, please do. And you can, hear more from him in his posts. And I know he's got a Facebook group that he works with. So, he's available and accessible. Yes, Nancy, I agree. Very well said. And Daniel, you are a very courageous soul. I really admire your story and your willingness to follow your own path and follow your own inspirations. And I just wanted to say, I feel a lot of the love of God coming through you.
Thank you.
There's something very, I have felt it, if you can believe it, God can shine through Instagram posts.
Yeah, man. But it's all energy.
It's all energy, exactly. But hearing you speak, I can really feel the spiritual passion that drives you and has for your whole life. And so I really just want to appreciate you for being on with me today. There will be a recording of this. Absolutely. It'll show up on my Instagram, and I'm sure Daniel will share it on his Instagram feed for people. But yes, takes a couple of hours, but it'll be up there. So let's do this again, because I want to speak more about what I want to speak to you about next is the perennial nature of religions, the ways in which all the religions are windows onto the same truth.
Right. Yeah, man, I'm here for it. Let me know.
That's great. Well, we'll set that up in a little bit and do it. Thank you so much, my friend, for being here today, and thanks to everybody for joining. And yes, we will do another one with you, and let's just stay in touch. I'm really enjoying getting to know you. So,
sure.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks a lot, y'all. Much love.
Lots of love. Bye-bye.